So thank you everyone for joining the Community Development Committee meeting and Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, May 2nd. I don't think we need to do roll call. I can see all council members are present, as well as the mayor and Mr. Rogers. I also have City Administrator Mike Sauerwein on as well. Any comments on the agenda from council members? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Let me go to my other screen here. We'll take public comments. Anything that's from the public not on the agenda. However, I don't see anyone in the attendees. I see someone in attendees that we can promote Kara up to panelist as a council member. So seeing no one in the attendees, we'll go past public comments. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Any comments from council members on the minutes? See none. I have one item on the minutes. Apologies for not getting it to you ahead of the meeting, but there was one public comment on the March 7th meeting. So that should be noted under citizen comments. There was Ms. Lux spoke briefly during that meeting, and I believe also I'm trying to remember if it was one other comment, and I couldn't remember who it was, and I was hoping somebody could remind me. But maybe take a look back and let's check that.
Yeah, we will do that.
But I think let's go ahead and push those minutes then. We'll just approve them at the next meeting.
Okay.
With those two items, with the two comments added.
Okay, got it. Any
objection to that with council? No. All right, we'll keep moving. Next item is regular business. Agenda Bill 22-070, Historic Downtown Relook Code Amendments. Jason, you have an introduction for us.
I'm actually going to hand it over to Mr. Gamble for this one.
Hello. Okay, let me pull it up. I would like to screen share. Okay, so here's the, can you all see my screen share real fast? And you can hear me, I assume. All right, always good to check these days. This is the agenda bill that will include a ordinance at a later date. Wasn't available at this time. We just need to do more confirmation work with legal to make sure everything's exactly as it ought to be. However, the concept for this agenda bill is to change some code language in the downtown historic districts code language that controls the site planning and some details related to street furniture, as well as some things like screening of rear building, mechanical equipment, things of that nature. That's kind of the gist and the intent of the document, or of the ordinance. There's a document in the lower section that's more akin to a working document where you can kind of see the changes here. I'll scroll back to it, and then I'm going to get to the kind of the history of this. This here is the document that shows the changes to be made and then what's to replace in the blue, just for reference. And then the history of this process, I don't want to belabor it too much because I believe just about every single person on this call is either extremely familiar or rather familiar, I think. So I don't want to go too far into the weeds here, but the short of it is that for the last, I believe, year and a half, the city has been working to build a new and revised downtown Relook, which at the time of its origin looked to be more of a 15 codes changes or suggestions from the Planning Commission. And this followed some review of fence standards and height standards that took place back in 2018. So following that request for a review of some downtown historic standards, the Planning Commission brought that to council, or I'm sorry, Community Development Committee, this committee, and the recommendation was to narrow down the suggestions to a more focusable effort and things that could accommodate the city in a more short-term time window. So finding an opportunity for efficiency essentially, and to find the best of the 15 and narrow it down and bring it back. The Planning Commission reviewed it, narrowed it down, brought it back to CDC. It was thumbs up to go ahead and actually create a more formal version of the document, which is the ordinance and this agenda bill. And so we are now at that stage where we're now bringing back the Planning Commission's recommendation in an official ordinance that has had a public hearing. And that public hearing happened at the previous Planning Commission listed in the agenda bill. And I suppose I can leave it there for questions, but I could also dig right into exactly what's all changed. But I want to make sure I leave room for any questions or concerns about history or process or how we got here and kind of that kind of parts before I delve into the what is suggested for changes.
Just a clarification, Dylan. I want to make sure I'm not confused at how this was written, but right at the top of the screen it says return with a formal ordinance and recommendation on September 20th, 2022. Was that meant to be 2021?
I'm going to read it real quick so that way I'm being
accurate. At the bottom of the screen now.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
guys, the faces in my way.
Just above analysis.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. So the Planning Commission made the suggestion of the code language. It was much more informal back on September 20th, 2021. The suggestion from CD was to go and formalize it and bring it back. So
why don't you just make a note to edit that in the summary to say 2021, because it when I first read it, I thought, okay, we're going to do this and have an ordinance by September 20th, 2022. And I'm like, wait a minute, that can't be right. There's got to be something there.
Okay, I'm going to write that down real fast. Thank you for catching that. That's a very silly typo, but so I appreciate it.
No problem. I just want to make sure we're all clear on what we're targeting. So, council members, any questions from you on what Dylan's presented so far? Nope. Okay. All right, keep going, Dylan.
Okay. So I'll get down to kind of the nitty gritty of it. You could read this. I'm going to explain it in words. Instead, I'm going to take you down to the code language section. The proposed changes, you could break them down into a few categories. So the first one here, which we'll call A, modifications to street furniture and standards. In the original bit of Snoqualmie's municipal code here, there's pretty minimal descriptions and minimal opportunities, so to speak, for downtown to kind of enforce when new development happens or substantial redevelopment to include more streetscape amenities and features in the historic downtown. This is a good percentage of all the opportunities that existed in the current language. The suggestion at the time and currently is to include quite a suite of new opportunities for streetscape amenities that include things from all over. There's a lot of opportunities and discussion for tonight even to kind of walk through this, but I'll assume you read through it and you don't want me to go over it. But there's things like park benches, obviously, but more expanded to include more visually engaging things, historical plaques, some bicycle racks and things of that nature. But I would like to add that there's a bit, it's not just that, the applicant could just pick their favorite things here, but they kind of have to work within the parameters of what the director of community development department determines is the best way to capture these amenities. So they'll more or less go through a process of analyzing what streetscape amenities exist at the time, and then look into what best fits that bill of what could come in later. And that'll be obviously a conversation with any sort of applicant. There's going to be some wiggle room. Everything has opportunities for these kinds of things, and that's captured here in the language as well. I just want to call that out because moments like this, it could seem as if the recommendation is just to let the developer pick whatever their favorite amenities are. In Planning Commission, the longstanding joke was that we're going to end up with 15 clocks in downtown because that was what some developer could want, and how do we make sure we avoid it? So the language here is to make sure that we don't end up with 15 clocks in downtown and no benches, for instance. Anyway, enough jokes, but I'll scroll down to the second standard, and that is more of a what we would call it a mechanical covering thing. That's mechanical covers and enclosures. That's really where a lot of this language comes from in our original Snoqualmie Municipal Code, which is right here in the red. You'll see that it describes screening for trash receptacles, recycling. Think of this as the backsides of buildings. So right now, if you were to go on Falls Avenue, you'd see trash cans and trash bins, waste management type bins. And the concept here would be that if there is substantial redevelopment in Falls Avenue, but if there is new development in the historic district, they would be required by this code to include a much more extensive screening of any of their facilities. So that includes recycling, mechanical equipment, and trash. There's a lot to this code in order to make it both accommodating and to capture the intent of the language, which is to be strict strict at all possible opportunities, but to be aware that each building will kind of have to adapt itself to the language here. So the code generally has the ability to create variances to these kinds of requirements. You'll see that in the entire site planning and architectural standards code for Snoqualmie's historic district. So instead of including too many qualifiers, Planning Commission focused in on a very strict reading. So these are all shall call outs here. So just to kind of make sure that you're aware of a conversation that Planning Commission had in terms of being kind of structured, organized, and very clear, and trying to make the language, do the work that was wanted, which is to actually have people put walls up to screen their trash and not get around it by some sort of variance or some sort of applicability standard. Then I will scroll down to the third and final category, so to speak, of the code changes. And this is within the definition section of the historic district. Most all cities have a definition section at the top of most of the sections. Sometimes they'll break it down even further, but the definitions help the code read accurately and properly. So there's many instances in which a defined term or phrase has an ambiguous meaning. The definition section is often used to clarify the intent of the language so that the section reads properly and can be enforced properly. In this instance, we took the chance to bring in a pair of documents that the city produced back in, you can see 2007 and 2010, the downtown master plan, the downtown vision plan. Both of these documents have call outs to goals and objectives, kind of like a comprehensive plan, except for more focused in on the downtown. And these goals and objectives sought to, well, they did a lot of things, but a big focus for the Planning Commission in adding these was that they would include a lot of the streetscape and frontage, rear frontage opportunities that Falls Avenue could imbue. So the documents call out things like Falls Avenue should include architectural standards and site planning standards such that it acts as a main primary frontage and not just a place for trash receptacles to simply go. So to bring in opportunities to make the rear frontages more of an actual primary frontage as well, and whatever opportunities they have there. There's actually quite a few little call outs to select, opportunities that the city could take upon itself to imbue. And this is a way to give the Planning Commission the opportunity to call out these documents when they review historic district design review projects, such as the ones you've seen lately. The Planning Commission has reviewed lately. Any type of redevelopment in downtown now, if this was adopted, they could call out the downtown master plan and say that this plan or this project, this detail of it, it should match the goals and intents of the downtown master plan. So that's the intent of including it in the definition section, so that the Planning Commission has access to it and can bring it to bear on review projects. And that is the final section. I said 3, I switched between A, B, and C, and 1, 2, 3. Apologies for that, but yeah, three categories: the streetscape amenities, the facilities screening, and the definition section changes. And I'll stop talking now.
No, thanks for the introduction. remember when we tasked the planning commission on this way back when, and I think that was a tall ask, and I'm appreciative that the planning commission took it on and went in full head first, and really made a good effort to decipher the, hey, what if you take a look at this and turn that into something. Joe's very familiar with it. I'm very familiar with it. Councilmember Mayhew's familiar with it. Mayor Ross is very familiar with it. So I think I've got a couple things I want to comment on, but I want to leave it. I want to open the floor to the council members. So if they have anything they'd like to comment on first, and then we'll kind of figure out where to go next. So Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember Mayhew, Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks. I feel like I got to say everything I wanted to say about this while I was on the planning commission. I came up, 2 or 3 meetings short of actually passing this thing. But I did want to just thank the staff for all of their very hard work gathering all sorts of things we had asked them for. Examples of ways that trash receptacles can be screened, and finding comparable cities with their downtown plans and things. So they just did an awful lot of legwork on this. So I definitely don't think that the Planning Commission deserves full credit for all of it. It was certainly a large effort by city staff to gather the resources that we needed to get this together. And I do think that would have been funny if we'd have included decorative clocks as an inside joke.
Councilmember May.
Yeah, I think this looks fantastic. I'm in support of all this. I have just 2 concerns that I just wanted to bring up. They're both of a similar vein, and they come out of just a concern, especially given some recent things that went through the Historic Design Review Board and into the City Council. And they really come out of a concern with how someone could understand these things as being, or perceive them to be not clear and not specific. So I'm not saying this very well. There's some word I'm looking for that I'm not finding. So let me give you an example.
You're coming up with the word subjective language is what you're
there. Subjective. I knew there was a word I was looking for. Subjective. And so I'm just worried about that, because I think we ought to do everything that's here, but just do it in a way with the least subjective language, so that we don't land, some of these things have our community development director making a call, some of them, and I don't know, with the appeals process, I don't know, I'm not asking to be told exactly how all that works right now. It's more just trying to protect those who have to make those kind of interpretations is really what I'm getting at. So there's 2 examples. I didn't try to do it comprehensively. So the 2 examples I just wanted to call your attention to were, there's at the bottom of page 1, there's item 10, and it talks about artwork. And what it says is artwork approved by the Snoqualmie Art Commission. It doesn't state any particular criteria that the commission should use. So it seemed like that could be perceived to be subjective, not objective, and therefore, create problems for the art commission or others down the road. So I was just worried that didn't have specific criteria that should be evaluated against. And then there was another example I wanted to bring out. Now I've lost it. Just give me a moment. Well, I've lost it. So I suppose what I was thinking is I guess I'm expecting that this is going to come back to us at a future meeting when we actually have the ordinance ready. And my thought is maybe just ask that this just be looked at. Is there any way that we can help with the language so that the intent of the planning commission in their recommendation just gets tightened up so that there isn't that the language here doesn't end up sort of creating problems down the road when someone tries to apply it. Can we be a little tighter? Like some of the language in here is fantastic. Shall be 6 feet, shall be 12 feet apart, shall be no longer that. So it's very much of it has very clear, at least to my way of thinking, very clear criteria, but some of it doesn't. So maybe just one more review with that kind of a lens, I think is something that seems like might make some sense to me. But to be clear, I support everything that's in here. I just want to make sure it's as sort of strong and enforceable as we can make it.
Councilmember Johnson, your hand's still up? Or
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I do want to comment on the issue about art, because we did talk about that to some degree. And I think that what we on the commission, since I was there at the time that that discussion was happening, were concerned about was exactly where the boundary is between the different commissions. So for the planning commission to define what counts as art that would fit in the downtown area versus what wouldn't. So I'm sure the planning commission would be happy to take a look at that in a little bit more detail if that's what the committee desires. But I would almost wonder, is that something that that we could actually ask the art commission to look at? Are they allowed to review code and make suggestions, or is that outside the purview of them? I was just wondering if for that particular thing, if the planning commission is the best body to address it, or if the art commission can address it.
Councilor Mayhew, you want to follow up on that, or you got a new one?
Well, I was just going to say, I think I agree with everything Councilmember Johnson just said. I think my comments are not intended to try and send this back to the planning commission for more work. I think they've done great work. I think their recommendations to me seem clear. I'm just looking for, can we put some in a few, can we just do one more review for language? And I think this idea of, hey, if we can get some specifics from the art commission as to what criteria they would use and put that in. I'm just thinking if we can help, and when I say we, I mean city staff can help by tightening up some of this language while just retaining, I think planning commission has done all the work they need to do. I'd like to see it move forward, but I'd just like to help them bring something forward that's a little stronger. So yeah, I love what Councilmember Johnson was saying. I just wanted to sort of say, yeah, this is not about trying to lengthen this out. Just can we try and help them? That's all.
Jason and Dale, let me jump on this too before you guys speak, because I've got similar feelings about it. But I don't know. I don't think we need to add my opinion. I maybe what I'm thinking here is probably not adding information here based upon how the art commission operates, but making sure that the art commission has clear definitions to how they review art, what would their criteria be, how would they accept, do they have an application process that would allow you to come in and say, okay, I want you to review this sculpture or this mural. Does it even go to the art commission for approval? I seem to remember we had when the murals on the side of the Snoqualmie Brewery were reviewed, it only went to the planning commission. It didn't go to the art commission. So those sorts of things I'd want to make sure we had a process in place. If we're referring to the artwork approved by Snoqualmie Art Commission, we better have a way of approving artwork from the art commission. So Jason or Dylan, did I piggyback on what you guys were going to mention as well?
You did a little bit, Chair. I was going to, the couple things I would add here is one of the duties of the art commission that's listed in the code is to advise and assist the city in connection with such other artistic and heritage activities as mayor or council may request. That's pretty broad, so we could certainly ask the Arts Commission for additional input here. And also just ask them for some details on how they look at art. The second thing to add about the Arts Commission is that the Arts Commission is charged formally with looking at public art. And so the distinction when it comes to, for example, murals in the historic district is that a mural that's privately commissioned and being placed on private property isn't subject to the Arts Commission, strictly speaking. And so we review it through the Historic Design Review Board because it is, of course, an exterior, it affects the exterior look of a building, which falls under the Historic Design Review Board's purview. There have been situations in the past where the Arts Commission has in fact commissioned a mural, so it's publicly commissioned and placed on private property. That's where the line gets a little fuzzier because you have the Arts Commission, of course, commissioning this piece of art and it's being placed on the side of a wall. So the Historic Design Review Board then has to review it. That's where the interaction gets a little trickier there, but we've certainly navigated that in the past. Certainly the Arts Commission's input would be valuable in hearing the answers to your question about, well, what is their criteria? Do they have appropriate criteria for dealing with things that are listed here? Part of the reason you see them listed here at all is because these are things that by definition would be placed within the public right of way. So they would essentially be public art in that regard, even though they're getting a credit toward, essentially toward private development. So that's where the Art Commission role comes in for that one. So, yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no, you're headed on the same path I am. So I got to kind of figure out how to make sure we don't go down a path of saying, okay, specifically what the words say is artwork approved by the Snoqualmie Art Commission, and then not have the ability for the Art Commission to review it because it's on private property or because it doesn't fit their criteria for review. So probably need a little bit deeper look at that section for sure,
right?
In how that applies in and maybe it's having the Art Commission have that as part of their they're providing their definition. Maybe it could be as simple as a section in their I don't want to call it bylaws, but that sort of implications that they have if you're applying for this, doing artwork as one of your quote unquote credits, that this is what you need to do.
Right. And I think to the other issue raised by Councilmember Mayhew on, do we have, are there things that are arguably subjective in here? I think, as with all codes, or certainly design codes, there's always going to be some element of subjectivity involved, which is to an extent unavoidable, especially when dealing with, not everybody likes certain colors, but we have a color palette, for example. All that said, I think, especially since we're looking to get some additional input from the Arts Commission here, we'll also take the opportunity to go through some further legal review with this, just to make sure because we've been through some already, of course, and the Planning Commission has looked through this very extensively because these issues have come up. Who gets to decide? What is the language clear enough? But certainly the City Attorney's Office is well aware of the issues you've raised, Councilmember Mayhew, and that the rest of the committee has echoed here. So there's no issue with taking a much closer look at that to make sure we have picked up on everything. And if there are some areas that could be construed as unclear, we would certainly look to address that. And now is a better time than later.
That's what I totally agree, Jason. And that's the idea of this, is to go through this, get you some feedback. That we'll get to the next steps. I think at the end, I've got some items I reviewed over the weekend as well that go to that subjective language. And thank you. Most everyone knows that I spend my day job and have for the last 28 years finding ways to find those languages and codes that are subjective or objective and open up the cracks, whether it's through a design review or zoning or contract changes, all the projects that I've had over my career. This is something that I do on a regular basis. And so there were 4 items in here that I saw that needed to probably have a closer look and look at. And let me just go through those so you have them, so you can kind of put that on the checklist. First one is under intent. I believe that if I asked everyone on the call here to define their attractive and comfortable, we probably get 11 different descriptions. And so that's one of those subjective things, is to ask somebody what is attractive and comfortable. So I think I would take a really close look at whether we want to include that. I see the intent as what the second item is, which is to enhance the unique character and identity of downtown Snoqualmie. You could say, what is that? Well, that's what's defined in what's below and what's in the code, is the unique character of downtown Snoqualmie. So I think I think the way the first let's say little I is defined, is listed, is probably needs a little bit of refinement to get away from that subjective of attractive and comfortable, but maybe it's to create improved pedestrian environments or safe pedestrian environments. But again, we're trying to stay away from those words that could be manipulated. In general, just want to make sure it's clear that in general, this is fantastic. This is great because it's got definitions, it's got clarity, it's got when we're talking about seating, each 6 feet of seating area or 4 individual seats count. That's great because that gives you a really good definition. The one that then jumped out at me when I was going, because I'm going down here looking at it going, okay, trash receptacles, seating, special pavement or tree grates, those sorts of things. But the one that caught my eye also was the permanent landscaping elements. It just says that planting beds and other landscaping elements that add visual interest to the sidewalk as determined by the director. I think that leaves it open to, if I was doing the project, I'd go, well, what does that mean? I have to call the director and find out what is a visual interest for me to go ahead and move down that, as opposed to giving it a definition like you do fences or benches, which is minimum 2-inch caliper trees, or pots at a certain size, or continuous landscaping of shrubs or grasses of a certain type, and those sorts of things, or referencing a part of the code that has that information if it is there. So that's the other one that so under the number 6 kind of caught my attention. The other one's really a minor one, which is we're really specific up above by saying as determined by the community development director in multiple places, and then we get down here and it just says as determined by the director. So there is some of those, maybe just a word search to find everywhere it says director and make sure it specifically references community development director. I found loopholes by saying by seeing those types of words in codes, and I don't want somebody to do that with ours as well. I'll get to here, Joe. I got 2 more. The next one was on number 13. Again, similar to about how we define art, features that are publicly funded, already required by code, and or obstruct pedestrian movement may not qualify as amenities, subject to the decision of the historic review board. That seems like then I don't know if that's defined, or is that become again subjective to being in front of the historic review board, and not every project has to go in front of the historic review board. At least I'm not. I think not. I think there could be an exception to that. So I was one of those. I wasn't sure how to respond to it, but I was looking at it and thinking, okay, how do we do that? And then lastly was under the next section where I really like the service and waste loading and waste enclosures. And anytime we can use the word odoriferous in our code is just that's pretty awesome to find the word finds. The one that caught my attention was under the screening measures, under that portion there, is trying to define the architectural theme of the site. When it says architectural theme of the site, the first thing it thought me was, well, this is the historic downtown district, so it should be the architectural, should be somehow tied to that. So if you're doing screening, if your building, is doing metal, has like a corrugated sheet metal that's historic to that building, but the screening would have no connection to that. Or if somebody says, well, we're doing CMU that's clad, down low, so we're going to do CMU there, then you'd get screening that this sorts of gets discontinuous. So I didn't know how to, again, it was another one of those I didn't know how to respond to. It just seemed a little subjective that maybe the enclosures should have some way integrated into the overall landscape and architectural theme of the site, but it somehow needs to be tied, I think, to meeting historical district standards as well. So you don't get materials that are being used that are off the edge. So Joe, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Two very little things. One was that director was sometimes capitalized, sometimes not. Yeah. And otherwise, on number 4 there, right there on the screen, there's a strike through on the I, and I want to make sure that that stays as a 4 and doesn't someday turn into a 5. That's it.
You lost me on that. So it's on the I.
Yeah, there's a strike through on the I on 4, Roman numeral 4.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
Oh,
you
under 6.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be 4, but it's number I. Yeah, under number 6. I see
Yeah,
that.
okay. It might very well, there might very well have been a 4 there before, and it got removed for other reasons, and we missed that one.
So the only thing that I would close out before we talk about next steps was we do have quite a few items that are at the discretion of the community development director, and it would seem as a, if we're doing a comprehensive relook and we're looking at how can we define these for someone, as community directors, as we've experienced, community development directors can change. And I think we may need to want to look at a few of the where it says it's at the discretion of the community development director, and look at it from a standpoint of, well, what is more applicable to the code, to not leave it subjective to one person that may change over time, and have it be more written into, as we have with 6-foot high fencing and screens, benches of a certain length, fences of a certain size, enclosures of a certain type, those sorts of things, and try to not have too many of those that get down the path of leaving it subject to someone's opinion. So Dylan, you had your hand up. I'm gonna give you a chance there.
I just wanted to kind of ask a clarifying question, so that way my notes are really clear, if that's all right. On the upper section here, the call out to the kind of intent of the whole street amenities section here is written down at the bottom. This community development director will maintain a list of amenities, appropriate number and type of streetscapes the desired amenities include. And so it's all of the below, but are not limited to. And part of the reason why, and I admit this is probably because I'm too close to this document, and all the words and all the mistakes feel like, I'm very personal to them, I guess. But I just want to make sure.
Things. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's okay.
They're always penalizing in some little way, usually, and that's okay. It's a growing document. It has to fully work its way through. So I just want to make sure that if this could be changed to be less subjective or meet the intent, is this the kind of section that is kind of a target for modification then? Or is it more akin to strengthening the definitions below? So I guess part of the reason why I maybe pushed Planning Commission into all these CD director decision opportunities is because we're asking the CD director to kind of keep an amenities list and find opportunities and to include things that could not be predictable from our point of view now writing the code. So I just want to make sure however we move forward, that I'm suggesting the language properly to address your concerns.
Well, I think my comments, I'll start with mine this time. It wasn't that I was concerned that the community development director is going to maintain a list. It's more about how, really it's the department maintains the list, or the entity that governs this work maintains the list, and it passes on along the way. You could probably, this is a really minor item, but you could indent starting with seating and make those sub numbers, so it was clear that those were under the streetscape amenities and they're approved. And you already mentioned that, let's have another look at the legal language, because if, saying may include but not limited to may be better to rephrase that in a way that it has more, binding legal sort of language and clarity on what that is. But again, I don't think it's an issue with how it's written in terms of the development director maintaining a list, because it's a city of Snoqualmie list, essentially. But it's yeah, I wouldn't worry too deeply about how you've written that. You've done a really good job here. These are not easy things to do, to put this together, and planning commission as well. I'm sure, as Joe will attest, reviewed numerous more than what is listed here as options. So. Councilmember Johnson.
One other thing that I wanted to mention is that, and I feel like I kept bringing this up in our meetings, was that I have a desire, a wish that, especially for those businesses along Falls Avenue, that there be some sort of a communal place for where they could have their trash, so it wouldn't be what could, in a place that could otherwise be frontage, but it's difficult to make it frontage when that's the only place to put their trash. So I'm not sure exactly to what degree that could happen, but it was a desire that I certainly had, if there could just be a better place where they could all put their trash collectively, instead of storing their trash right in front of the building. I suppose that's more of a wish list for the future than necessarily a change to this.
I can add, this has come up before, and there were some efforts made. It's probably been 3 or 4 years now, to move in that direction. Effectively, the issue became that the city was willing to help find a solution, and the various business owners, property owners, because there's a lot of people involved with downtown in general and Falls Avenue in particular, they effectively couldn't find a way to agree on how to make it happen, because there was a lot of issues that get wrapped up. Who's paying for what, where it's located, how they get things from their businesses to the location. Is it too far? Is it too, et cetera, et cetera. So we've tried in the past. We're certainly aware of the issue, and we're continuing to talk to them about it. I wouldn't say it's the highest thing on the downtown merchants list right now. They have some other concerns that they have been more focused on, but we can definitely make sure to re-engage a little more strongly with them on that, to see what, just what might be possible, because some level of consolidation, even if it's not the one big area for all for everybody on Falls Avenue, even consolidating to just a few would arguably be an improvement. So we can, we'll talk with Nicole and with the Parks and Public Works Director, Mike Chambliss, and see what we can figure out there.
Sounds good. Any other comments on the document and edits and direction of this as it stands now? Not seeing anyone. Okay, so I think the question I have then, Jason, I probably need your input on is what the next steps are. I mean, certainly I don't know, maybe we do need to send this at least back to the Planning Commission to take a look at refining some of them, or can I also at the same point, we're perfectly, we are burdened with the responsibility for doing that same thing at this committee.
Right.
And then going forward to council. So making another round of review and edits and then putting to council. So what is staff's thought on that?
Well, I think my impression is what this committee is asking for are not really major substantive changes. You're asking for some filing off of a few rough edges and some clarifications. So I don't think we necessarily need to send this back to the Planning Commission for further consideration. What we could do is take it to the Arts Commission for some input at their next meeting, and then, as I mentioned, work with the city attorney's office to look at, take a very fine look at the language, make sure we're removing as much of the subjectivity as we can out. And we've identified a couple other, minor things, regarding the intent that you identified, Chair, some of the other things, inconsistencies with director, community development director, and those are minor. So I think it would work to essentially keep this in this committee for now. It may not come back. Then I don't recall the Arts Commission's meeting schedule off the top of my head. Dylan might. So it may be. What I'm trying to say is it may be more than a couple of weeks. It might be a couple more meetings out, but we can certainly do it that way.
Councilmember Mayhew?
Yeah, I really endorse that approach, although I would say, based on some of the comments earlier, if staff wanted to circle up with the city attorney, and if the conclusion was, look, that's really just not their domain, and that's really not a workable thing. I personally, I think if staff were to come back to us and say, yeah, that doesn't really work, here's an alternative to deal with the concept, I'd be open to that. I think my own view is that the substantive work is done. Maybe I wasn't hearing correctly, but I didn't hear any of the three of us raise substantive issues. So this is more about, as Mr. Rogers said, what do you say, shaving off the rough edges, sort of trying to find some ways here to make this just implement better. But it seems pretty clear that everyone thinks the substantive intent is there. This is just about making it work a little bit better. So I'd say, let's ask staff to do their best shot at that, come back to this committee, and then let's move it along. I think there's a lot of other things coming down the pike for this department and for council. So since the substantive works are done, I'd encourage staff to take a real good shot at this and come back to us on that basis, and let's move forward.
I tend to agree, and that we look to you, Jason, you, Dylan, to take a look at it and see where we're at. Talk with Anna and Bob and see what the legal language needs to be. Go ahead and refine it with some edits. Let us know what those edits are. We'll track those going forward, so we keep some consistency with knowing what the changes are, and when it's ready to come back to this committee, we can review it again. I think I don't see substantive, so I can't. If you ask me to say appurtenances, I can say that. I can't say substantive. There's no really deep issues from my perspective on the direction this is going. It's going the right direction. Just want to kind of refine some of those things so that there's not that subjective language, and there's not the loophole type of situation. Similar. It says we use on here on when I'm looking on my screen, it says like bicycle racks. So it doesn't tell me what kind of bicycle racks. That leaves it wide open to somebody just saying, well, I provided a bicycle rack. How many bicycles? What sort of style does it need to fit the character of a certain look of the historic district, that sort of thing. That's kind of provide your suggestions, and when it fits. I don't think we're in a hurry to do this. I think we want to do this right because it can then stay codified for duration that is significant.
Makes sense.
Anything else, Councilmember Johnson, from you? I mean, we just spent, you spent what, 18 months of your time on the Planning Commission, and we just spent 40 minutes and sent it in another direction. Are you okay with that?
It didn't sound to me like it's going in another direction. It sounds like it's going in the same direction.
All about refinement. It's all looking good. You guys did a good job.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next item. Agenda Bill 22-072, comprehensive plan docket.
That one is mine. So let me get this up here. So this is the agenda bill as the chair identified, and I won't run through all this. I still need to add a summary statement to this, I'll admit, but the background and the analysis is all here. So To implement the Growth Management Act regarding comprehensive plan amendments, the city has adopted a process in Chapter 21.20 of the Municipal Code regarding docketing amendments to the comprehensive plan. The city's cycle runs from November 1st through October 31st every year. We have this process so that members of the public, most notably, but anybody can suggest or request amendments to the comprehensive plan and to the city's development, development regulations, the zoning code mostly, but there's also some additional sections of the code, or rather titles of the code. So Title 14, 15, 16, 19, or 21 that are all, broadly speaking, the city's development regulations. Under the Growth Management Act, the city can only amend the comprehensive plan once per year. There are a couple exceptions to that, but they're generally not, they're pretty rare to take advantage of those. And so that's one of the main reasons for the docketing process, is to achieve the efficiency, because if we get 5 requests, well, you can't amend the comprehensive plan 5 times a year. You can only do it once. So we put them all together, and it allows for a more holistic view of, if you do this amendment, how might it affect this other amendment? How might it affect these other parts of the plan, so that we're not doing these little one-off amendments. So for this year, the city received 5 requests to amend the comprehensive plan or development regulations. 2 of those were for amending development regulations, but after further discussion with this committee back in December, the requester withdrew those 2 because they weren't actually for amending development regulations. They were amending other parts of the code. And those requests would need to go directly to the city council for consideration. They're not part of this process. So what we're left with are 3 requests to amend the comprehensive plan. All 3 were from Mr. Scheel. You can see them listed in the table there. The first one is and this is a summary, his specific requests are attached to the agenda bill, so you can see the language he used. But in summary, request number 1 was to clarify that development proposals should have secured water rights prior to approval. So request 2 was to balance job types with housing types. So for example, if we're adding retail jobs, which tend to be, of course, lower wage, then we need to have more affordable housing, versus if we're adding office executive jobs, then we could be adding more, say, more expensive single family detached housing, just as a broad example. And then request number 3 was to redefine the listed growth targets in the comprehensive plan as targets rather than minimums to meet. So under the city's process, the Planning Commission has to set a review schedule in January and hold a public hearing on that review schedule. This was done. Then the Planning Commission considered the requested amendments in a series of meetings starting in February and going through April. The Planning Commission then held a public hearing on April 18th, 2022 to take additional public input on the requested amendments. Mr. Scheel spoke at that public hearing. And then the Planning Commission then had further deliberation. What you see in here is staff's recommendation, which the Planning Commission subsequently adopted with some adjustments, which was to deny all 3 of the requests. Staff's general belief is that while all of these are in general worthy of further discussion as part of the city's major comprehensive plan update, the timing isn't right for now in some cases, because we have this major update coming, which is a better venue to consider these, frankly, pretty major potential policy adjustments. And there are also some additional issues with a couple of these requests that aren't really workable, most notably on the growth targets one. So there's a resolution attached to this, which I won't, go through. The major change that I want to identify that the Planning Commission added, this is and it's reflected here in section 2. This is the resolution the council could take action on. Is the Planning Commission requested that they continue the discussion about these amendments throughout the rest of this year and into the next couple of years through the major comprehensive plan update. They didn't want to just take these amendments and say, no, thank you, push them aside. They felt the subjects were worthy of some further discussion and for potential inclusion. So that was carried forward in the Planning Commission resolution. It's carried forward into this draft resolution for council consideration here as well. So I can certainly answer any questions about the requested amendments or about the Planning Commission's discussion. I didn't see that Mr. Shield was in attendance at this meeting to speak to the amendments if the committee so chose. But like I said, his specific requests are attached to the agenda, Bill, so you can see those.
No, thanks for the summary and the analysis there. Councilmember Mayhew.
Love it. It's perfect. Send it on to the council with our approval.
Councilmember Johnson, any comments?
Nope.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion as Councilmember Mayhew. It's pretty straightforward. I do like that the Planning Commission recognized that a couple of these items could be looked at further. That are clearly going to be part of the what areas can be part of the purview of the city council and policy setting for those items. Certainly will be, especially for what we need some information. You touched on all of it. So I do agree with the recommendation from the Planning Commission to not adopt the amendments and to move forward with them as being denied. So is that a move it to council with recommendation to?
Yes, consent. Send it on consent. It's straightforward.
Yeah,
Or is it if it's not an ordinance, let's send it on consent.
I don't see why it would not be able to go on consent. I think I agree. Joe, any issues with that? The only thing would be make sure we got a summary statement in there. It's the only thing.
Yep. I will add that. We'll put on consent.
If you want me to review it ahead of time, let me know. But I think it's a consent item with recommendation for approval.
Okay.
Approval for denial. That's always the tough one. All right. Next item is something I added to the agenda. This is a prep item. This isn't a come up with all of your priorities item. This is just something that came about from our discussion at the retreat and then subsequent listening to the council meeting and discussing the discussion that went on. I think it seems prudent for the committee, being that our committee tends to span a lot of areas and really look at policy, for us to have a conversation going forward about priorities for this committee. Priorities that can then be forwarded to council and be giving advice forward based upon our observations through this committee work. There's a few things that are on the docket for going forward. Things to upcoming items aren't listed necessarily here, although we know the comprehensive plan is coming forward, but there are some other code amendments and things that we can do to streamline areas in community development. One of the things that just to put a drop in the bucket to get you thinking about it, to prime, maybe just call it prime the pump, is we have codes and regulations governing Snoqualmie Ridge 1. We have codes and regulations governing Snoqualmie Ridge 2. We have codes and regulations governing the city of Snoqualmie. We have codes and regulations that may govern other areas through some, if you remember back to the form-based zoning changes that were for a small portion of the downtown area. Those don't always correspond. And one of the things that is a challenge for folks that when they come to the city of Snoqualmie is, okay, what do I need to do? And there's not really one clear direction there. And in most cases, we've probably gone far too long in absorbing the development agreement items that occur in both SR1 and SR2 into the municipal code. And giving folks that, it's a part of the city, it's been adopted, it's been completed, it's been delivered, we've signed off on it. It's time to move that into the codification. So that's something Jason and I have talked about and want to try to look at down the road. But those, that goes to that, is that a priority? And trying to figure out what are the priorities for this committee to be looking at from a policy standpoint to then take forward to council as recommended policy directions. So anyway, that's all I wanted to introduce. I'm happy to kind of, if we want to talk about it for a little while now, but that's something we're going to try to get on the agenda for this committee, maybe getting into June and July. When we start going forward and try to maybe set, the first one will be setting our priorities based upon council's. We want to complete what we're doing with council on a full council basis, but then and really see what applies here. So, Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, I think that that's fantastic. I would really encourage us to do that. In fact, the city clerk has put together a list, and we're using it now in F&A. I don't know if it. I thought maybe she was thinking about putting this together more broadly for other departments as well, but she's looked out over the next year and scheduled out sort of, well, what are the things we know are coming? Because you just referred to, Councilmember will say there's things we know that are coming later, roughly when they're coming. There's things we want to tackle ourselves. And so why not sort of schedule those out and really attack them? The one other thing I'd say is I think there's some big things that this committee's been trying to get to for a few years and hasn't had the time, hasn't found a way to get to, that I think are really important to many council members. For example, what are we going to do in the realm of attainable housing? We have passed some taxes over the last few years that are starting to accumulate, and while they're not an enormous amount per year, the idea is that as they add up, we can do a lot with those funds, especially if we find ways to leverage that into things that public-private partnerships or setting the groundwork for private development that meets some of the objectives that we might have. So there's just a whole realm of work we do there. And I know there are other council members who would love to help out with sort of driving that forward. So I think the more conversations we have, maybe even have some ad hoc committees where some of the other council members get involved on certain topics like attainable housing, for example. I just think there's a lot of council policy that needs to be done and can be done, and that the council members are eager to do. So I love that you going in this path, and just would encourage us to do a lot of that. I think there's a big appetite in the council to do that.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, it sounds like you weren't really taking a list at the moment, but just want to throw it out there. We might want to review the guidelines for the Historic Design Review Board, and as we talked about earlier, tightening up some language. So at some point, we might want to ask the Planning Commission to take a look at those rules and give some recommendations to council.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. And I think those are the things that kind of they haven't been priorities. It just hasn't been seen as, we've got other, something else comes along that we need to address. And using past items, it would be, the Salish Lodge expansion, or even all the way back to just what was in the last discussion of the city, downtown vision and those sorts of things. Those are items that that help set the stage longer term, and I think that's what we as a committee should do, is set those priorities of what we think are those items that we need to tackle. And you know what, quite honestly, it might not happen until 2023 or 2024, but getting those things on the list of, hey, these sort of things need to be tackled, I think is a great, and I like the idea of very much so of scheduling them out. Obviously, there's other things so there are items that will end up on an agenda that we need to deal with and have to deal with, but and sometimes they'll get these sorts of things get bumped. If anybody remembers the tourism plan is a great example. It got bumped because it got other things going on, didn't really get through it, set a schedule, didn't follow it, got to COVID, disappears. Now we pretty much are back to square one because the world's a different place. Would that tourism plan, having been complete, been a really good reference document going forward? I think absolutely. I think that would have been a really great item to have in front of us. To give not only us, but anyone that's working in or looking at it, the city of Snoqualmie, whether it's a a developer or a or chamber of commerce, just to have that available to them. So I think those are kind of items. Whether we need a tourism plan or not was probably would be that part of fall into that priorities. And then if we do need one, and we felt we didn't one before, do we need one now? Let's get that on there. So that's adding to the list of items to discuss. So anything else, Councilor Mayhew?
Well, I was just going to add, I agree with everything you're saying. I do think, we have a small community development department. They do a fantastic job. They take care of a lot of things for us. It's just fantastic what they do. I think a lot of these things, they're a department of a certain size, they can do what they do. So I think for some of these policy discussions, if the council members can really commit to committees and maybe some ad hoc committees and really doing a lot of the policy level work, the discussions, kind of the prioritizations, I think we can really do a lot of work that would then set the stage for community development to do the staff to do things to help us out. But I think there's only, if we're waiting on them, I think there's only so much they can do. So let's set some of the policy table for them by doing the work as council members.
Mm-hmm. Good point. I'm going to do a quick little tangent. And Mayor Ross, since you're here, maybe you could play along with me, and you definitely have the right to say I'm not prepared to say anything yet. Do we have any sort of timeline for a community development director selection, or you have any idea when that might happen?
So SGR, they have resumes, and I think there's going to be some preliminary interviews like maybe next week.
Okay.
So eventually it will get to where the council members and myself and probably city administrator Sauerwein will interview final candidate. Actually, city administrator Sauerwein, we have.
Sure. We're going to be meeting with the headhunter next week to do a first skim of the resumes that have been received. And from there, depending on how many applicants we have, we'll be able to give you a better idea of a timeline going forward. Our goal, obviously, is to get someone on board as soon as possible.
Well, thank you for tolerating my question. That's completely off the subject of the agenda and such, but it really kind of goes to the priorities. And there's two tacks that could happen here. We could go and try and create create priorities, and then give the the applicants, have that be a part of the applicant's participation, or we can create priorities in a process and then have the the selected director then participate. And I'm kind of in the latter of that. Is it'd be nice to have input from someone who's taking the job on what direction we're going, and having that involvement. Obviously, council needs to set a lot of those policy directions, but the director plays a big role in that too. So appreciate. So if you were to give it a you'll have, I guess I don't want to push it, so let's say you should have some sort of timeline next week is what I heard. So
yeah, like I said, we're going to be meeting with the headhunter next week to do a first review of the applications we've received. And part of that conversation is also going to be trying to finalize the timeline going forward.
Yep. Thank you for that. Hybrid meeting discussion. Let's get this going and get this over here. Who's leading that one? Or who's been assumed? I know I've had some conversations. I know the mayor, you and Mayor Pro Tem and others have had conversations. And where are we at with the hybrid meeting discussion? Who wants to start?
Well, I guess I could start a little bit by adding some color here. There was a good discussion at the city council meeting last week about hybrid meetings. You heard from our IT director, we're set up to be able to do hybrid meetings. I think a lot of this discussion is a lot oriented around how does this committee want to operate effectively? Do you want to stay remote? Do you want to do something hybrid? And I see the city clerk is here too, and she can add some thoughts. I think there's a broad desire to try to find something regular and stick to it and not be bouncing, this week we're remote and next week we're mostly in person and everything like that. Recognizing that the flexibility is helpful, but it helps us and it helps the staff and it helps the members of the public also who, obviously not tonight, but sometimes we'll attend these meetings to have an expectation of how these meetings are occurring.
Mm.
That said, at the end of the day, it is up to the committee how you want to handle it, and we'll certainly work with you to make those things happen.
Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, that's not what I understood the direction of the council to be. My understanding was that their direction was that council and committee meetings should move to hybrid as soon as staff is able to support that. So maybe I misunderstood, but I thought that was the direction of council.
I would say, Councilor Mayhew, I don't think there's a misunderstanding there. I think we heard the direction loud and clear. We're trying to get some clarity from this committee specifically at this point as to how this committee wants to operate. And if that's a discussion, and that's the discussion we can have now. Certainly the council seemed to have some general concurrence to shift to hybrid council meetings and committee meetings. That said, that's a discussion this committee can have now and bring that back to the full council if there's some thoughts on how this committee in particular would like to operate. So
yeah, let me bring in Ms. Estrada here and see what I think. Deb, you've been compiling a lot of this and talking to a lot of folks, and I don't want to misstep and misconstrue in any direction that what's been decided. But what can you clarify here for us?
Well, we've had some new information that's come out just since Friday from the governor's office, which is going to kind of set the stage really for all of us and maybe take some of these questions off the table and away from us, which is based on the Washington Municipal Clerks Association understanding right now, and I believe City Administrator Sauerwein has had some communication with Sound Cities Association as well. The proclamation that's in place right now, 2028, is going to expire June 1. At which point, our understanding of it, and we're waiting for more guidance from MRC, is that all meetings subject to the OPMA, which our committee meetings are presently, will be required to hold their meetings have a physical location for their meetings. We can still choose to do them hybrid, but we no longer, some cities we're looking at that they might be able to continue to hold some of their meetings remotely, although hybrid. And so regardless, we have to have a physical location, I guess, to simplify it. We have to decide where at City Hall that's going to be. We can still hold virtual meetings or the remote component, ergo hybrid. We toss around all these words and get them kind of jumbled a little bit, but I don't think we're going to have much choice after June 1. We're going to have that physical location. As council indicated, they want a hybrid sitting so that people can still participate remotely. But staff and or council members are going to have to, someone's going to have to be present here at City Hall.
Okay.
I don't know if I clarified the message or muddied it. Again, we're waiting for more communication from MRC to help us kind of unwrap this more and give us more clarity around it.
So, Councilor Johnson, you go ahead first.
Yeah. So what I was hearing from that was that at least one council member would have to be in person at that physical location. Not sure if I heard that correctly or not, but that's the way that I interpret that in my head. And just separately, I just wanted to say that I personally know that I work best when I'm physically with people together based on my experience, as short as it's been in the last 5 months with council. But of course, I respect council members and their personal decisions and all that stuff as well. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
Mrs. Strada?
I just want to clarify, I think the number of council members that have to be present will be a council decision. There's nothing that says we can't have a physical study with no council members present. But if council wants to decide that a minimum of one council member or 2 council members be present at the physical location, it's my guess is your city clerk right now, that's a bigger decision or bigger policy discussion for the council to have. At a minimum, we have to have a physical location, which is going to require a staff member to be present to make sure people from the public can come in. If all of our council members are remote or participating remotely, we will still have to be able to, everyone has to be heard in that physical location. And so that they can actively participate or view their government carrying out the business of the group.
Okay, well, what I, if I can just, share, and I think it sounds to me like there'll still be continued discussions about this, but my understanding is that council said, let's go hybrid as soon as possible and make that available. The logistics of what that means obviously is going to be a fluid thing, but as chair of this committee, I would like us to have the flexibility to make sure all 3 council members could be present at every meeting where possible. Would certainly prefer to have those in person, but also subject to is that logistically feasible for those that work or have other responsibilities. We certainly can get our work done in a hybrid situation as easily as we can in a fully remote or fully in person. So I kind of think that this committee will follow the same direction that the council has set, and let's get to hybrid as soon as possible. And if that means we can be in person together, that's great. If it means that somebody has to be remote, we'll deal with that on an ongoing basis. I have that'll probably be something that I will, as chair, will take on the responsibility of working with Mr. Rogers and the community development and you Deb, and making sure who's going to be where at what time, and we'll just figure that out as we go from meeting to meeting.
Well, we appreciate the flexibility that you gave us this week. It was a pretty quick turn to check off all the boxes, and so that was very much appreciated. And I am working to bring back an agenda bill for an update on where we're at with hybrid meetings concerning the next meeting, so that we're keeping you apprised of where we're at.
All right. So I think the direction from the Community Development Committee is let's get to hybrid as soon as we can, and give us the opportunity to have a location and the ability to be in person. All right, that covers the agenda. I think we had a good session, everybody, today. I think we covered a lot of stuff here. So any items prior to adjournment? All right. Is there any objection to adjourning? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good
Thanks.
night.